everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of the Transporter Refueled. So, when I first saw the trailer for this movie, that was the first time I learned of its existence. I had no idea that they were planning on rebooting the franchise and recasting Jason Statham's role. I thought that this was retarded. I immediately got angry at the trailer for this reason alone. But the more I thought about it, the more I was trying to have an open mind because, to be fair, the Transporter franchise had mostly run out of steam by this point. Each film became progressively worse, while I believe each one also made less money. So naturally, the producers would want to go the reboot route, not just make a fourth film. They want to expand its audience. They want to bring back the original viewers, or actually, I should say, brand new viewers, while not relying on them having watched the first three films. And of course, with recasting Jason Statham, they'd want a younger, fresher, cheaper actor. And as much as I love Jason Statham, he's not the box office draw that he used to be. So it's like, I understand the logic, I just don't particularly like it. And I'm watching this new guy, try to fill Jason Statham's shoes, and I'm just thinking, he just looks way too pretty. I don't buy this guy as an action star. He doesn't look like he's ever been in a real fight in his life. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't. For all I know, Jason Statham is a real-life pussy, and this guy is a genuine badass, but I'm talking about screen presence. The only other thing I had seen him in was Game of Thrones. He was the first Dario before the character was recast. I'm thinking to myself, I'll probably be there opening weekend, but it's probably not going to be a very good movie. And now that I've seen it, I can assure you that it is not a very good movie. In fact, it outright fucking sucks. But it's not even the good kind of suck, where you can enjoy making fun of it, nor is it the extreme level of suck, where it leaves you angry and frustrated. It's just generic sucking. It's the kind of bad that you watch it, you don't enjoy yourself, and then when it's over, it immediately starts dissipating from your memory. It's like your mind is rejecting the entire experience. So I saw this on Friday, I did my written review Saturday, and now it is Sunday, and I sit down, I'm setting everything up, and I'm getting ready to film, and I think, wait, why did I dislike this movie so much again? And then I had to read my review just to kind of brush up on my feelings. And I'm like, oh yeah, this was pretty terrible. But it just goes to show that there's no lasting power within this film. There's nothing that's going to stay with you over a long period of time, making the entire viewing experience completely pointless. So yeah, I already say this. The Transporter Refueled is not worth watching, nor is it really worth talking about, because nobody's going to care in a few days. I'll be so surprised if this ends up being a box office hit. I will be very sad if it ends up being a box office hit, but we'll see. Let's start with what I liked about the film. The car chases were pretty good, and I want to emphasize the words pretty good, because I didn't think they were exceptional or amazing, but I appreciated the fact that it seemed to rely more on stunt work than CGI, or at the absolute least, the CGI was really good and was very smoothly incorporated into the actual stunt work. But I liked that. I thought the camera placement was always fine. A lot of these films always get too close to where it becomes difficult to tell what is happening, such as with the Taken movies. I didn't feel that at all here. I thought the editing was actually surprisingly smooth. The guy who directed this, he previously helmed Brick Mansions, but He's primarily known as an editor, and for some reason, whenever editors are promoted to directors, they often over-edit their movies, which is strange because you don't generally see that in the films that they had not directed. But this wasn't the case. I never found the action to be incomprehensible or disorienting. Solid stuff. The only problem is that the car chases, they tend to get a little repetitive. So after like the third one, you kind of feel like you've already seen this scene before. So it starts to lose its luster. And even though they try to get a little crazy, like when he drives into the airport, they still could have taken that farther. I blame the production values on this. Even though this film visually looks fine, it doesn't look like a cheap B movie at all, but unfortunately they probably did not have the money to go even farther with the spectacle. So it's a missed opportunity, but I could have been okay with this if the rest of the movie was at least not quite as bad. And already when it comes to the action, the badness seeps through with the hand-to-hand fight scenes. Holy shit, these were terrible. Good lord, where do I even start? So the first fight, like, you're seeing the transporter beat up some thugs who are trying to steal his car. And I already feel like something is wrong. Whatever reason, this fight just did not work. But it took a little bit before it occurred to me that it was the sound effects. They seem muffled. So all the punches and kicks don't really feel like they're connecting. They seem oddly soft. One of the most overlooked aspects of any hand-to-hand fight is the sound effects, because the actors are usually not really punching each other. They're stopping, short enough to where they could use editing and sound to make it seem like they really hit each other. But that aspect of these fights is just bad. It's just badly executed. So already, all of the fights, and this isn't just the earlier fights, it's all the fights in the entire movie, they don't feel very authentic, because you don't really feel like these characters are really trying to hurt each other. And then, like, in the middle, there's this one really silly battle where the transporter is stuck in this cramped, confined hallway with all these bad guys who are trying to beat him up. Well, he starts pulling out drawers in order to counter their attacks. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Jackie Chan has done similar stuff, but it just seemed overly choreographed to the point where it's just really phony. You'll see, like, a guy, he'll kick him, or he'll try to kick the transporter, then the transporter will pull out a drawer and he'll stop his foot, and then, the transporter will turn his attention to somebody else. And then, like, the guy who he just trapped will just kind of, like, stand there. He seems like he's kind of half-heartedly trying to pull out his leg, but you could tell that it's just because the actor isn't supposed to at this time. It doesn't feel like the character is really stuck. And but he's almost like politely waiting for the transporter to finish off somebody else before we could return back to him. And it's just so phony and goofy looking. And but really, I thought the worst fight in the entire movie was at the very end, where the transporter fights the main antagonist. And all the problems that have plagued the fight scenes throughout the rest of the movie are still prevalent, but this one seems a lot slower. And it was strange. Like, they're getting the fight, and you're like, okay, this is going to be badass, except you're not really thinking that because the rest of the movie has sucked so much. But, they're just like, and it doesn't seem like they're moving very quickly, or there's, like, no intensity behind these punches. It looks like a rehearsal for this fight scene and not the actual fight scene. And it totally took me out of the moment, because the pacing is just all off, and I was embarrassed for the actors. When it comes to action movies, I always am willing to accept a crappy screenplay as long as the spectacle keeps me distracted from it while I'm watching the movie. So, for example, I recently reviewed a film called Kung Fu Killer with Donnie Yen. and I said that it's a pretty bad film, except I actually liked it because the fight scenes were really good, and they kept my attention away from the shortcomings within the script. The previous Transporter movies, and I wasn't really big on either 2 or 3, but they had some of that, and the first film was a lot of fun, even though it was a pretty shallow action flick. But here, we've already gotten to the point where the fight scenes are really bad, and the car chase scenes are pretty good, but I'd still say the badness of the hand-to-hand fights outweighs the goodness of the car chases. So we're already in crappy territory, and we haven't even gotten to the screenplay yet. And you know that's going to be wonderful stuff. God, where do I start? Well, the plot itself is actually very thin and shallow, but I don't know if I'd say it's any worse than the previous Transporter movies, but at the same time, at least its predecessors gave me more of a reason to care about what was going on, even if just a little. So the story is, the Transporter is reconnecting with his father, and already I'm thinking, well, I'll come back to that later. However, he takes a job from this woman who immediately double-crosses him when she changes the rule, because, of course, the Transporter is real big on his rules. And she brings in these 2 other women, and he's like, no, I'm not doing this, get out of the car. But then it turns out that there was a 4th woman who kidnapped his father, and they're saying, you have to do what we tell you, or he's going to die. And so they have their own plan where they intend on stealing money from this gangster, the main antagonist, while also getting revenge because he's a human trafficker who was prostituting them. Okay, it's a thin storyline, but it's nothing totally stumbled on my words there. But it's nothing too flimsy. Like, if they had filled out these characters enough, I probably could have been okay with it. However, everything about it is executed poorly. For one, they have ruined the Transporter character. And I don't really blame the actor here, even though his casting is part of the problem. Just a note on that. I think that he is, I can't think of his name, but I think he is a pretty solid actor. He's charming, but he lacks the charisma of Jason Statham and just doesn't have the presence. So he's already at a disadvantage here because he's just not as good as Jason Statham. But even worse, it seems like the movie is constantly emasculating him, belittling him, always putting him in positions of vulnerability. So he's never really in charge of any situation. I mean, from the beginning, like when we're watching the interactions between him and his father, it turns out that these rules that he set for himself is because he wants to please his father. And I took an issue with this because the father just doesn't seem that strict or hard to please. In fact, he's actually very easygoing, even though they're telling us that he's supposed to be this kind of father, who his son is trying to impress. I love Ray Stevenson, and in many ways he is the bright spot of this movie because he's just so fun and charming. But here, I thought he was just too easygoing. He never really seemed all that concerned with what was happening, even though he's constantly getting kidnapped. So that totally strips the narrative of any tension. You don't really feel any sense of danger. Furthermore, it sort of contradicts the characterization that this film is trying to force down our throats, because he just doesn't seem like he'd be that difficult to please. And so I'm thinking... So I'm already kind of taken out of this, where the Transporter, I don't see why this is an issue with him. If anything, I feel like the Transporter himself is more stoic and a little bit more aloof to his father than vice versa. but whatever. But then he's outsmarted by these women multiple times throughout the film. He never actually comes out on top in any of their cat and mouse games, which could have been cool, except it's not. I'll get back to that in a bit. Or he's being outsmarted by the villain or his father, and like at no point, once again, I felt like this character was in control of the situation. Yeah, he's carrying the majority of the action scenes, whether he's driving or beating up people, but even then, like, the women are constantly just shooting him down, mocking his skills. Like, he gets out of this big fight with the one with the shells, and he returns, he's all beaten up and like, well, what were you doing? And he gives like this real, it's supposed to be this cool one-liner response, but I kept thinking, he needs to shut them up. This is getting ridiculous, how much this entire movie is disrespecting this character. So, this totally ruined the Transporter character for me. Now, if Jason Statham was still in this role, it might have been okay, because the character has already been established. Jason Statham was the toughest, smartest, most level-headed person in all of the other movies. So, like, now he's being taken out of his comfort zone. Now he's being put on the ropes. And therefore, that would give something new for this character to experience, and that would have been good. But this is a reboot, so all of that previous history is irrelevant. This is our first impression of the Transporter, this new Transporter, and it's not a good one. And I also felt like there's too many scenes where he's kind of trying to appeal to them, like he's saying, I want to talk to my father, and it's, once again, I just didn't feel like the right decision for this character. And then, like, okay, well, the girls, they're constantly outsmarting him, so these must be really good, strong female characters, right? Not really. To be honest, like, my main issue with them is that they're so interchangeable. Who was the dumbass who decided to have them spend the majority of the movie wearing the same fucking wig and black dress? I could not tell any of them apart. One is in a relationship with not Jason Statham. Well, that's it. One is in a relationship with not Jason Statham, kinda. There's some romantic chemistry there, but it's really only in one scene, and they sleep with each other. And that was another thing that kind of bugged me, is it felt almost like the Transporter was using her for sex. Well, I don't think that was the point, but then, like, immediately afterwards, he just plans on abandoning them, because eventually you do start sympathizing with these women, or you're supposed to, if they weren't such callous bitches who say and do so many things that get on your nerves. Another of the women is kind of having romantic tension with his father, and then the other two appear to be in a relationship together. They're constantly being shown making out, and that is the extent of their relationship, by the way. What bothered me, and I didn't really go into this for my review because I don't think it was the intent, and I wasn't really sure how to word this, but there are these prostitutes who were pretty much forced into this lifestyle, and they want out, and now we're seeing that these people are not just sex objects. They are strong women who are smart enough to outwit everybody they encounter, and they're brave enough to put their lives on the line, and they're loyal enough to each other to where they're fully accepting that they're probably not all going to get out of this alive. Cool, but the problem is every aspect of their characterizations feels overly sexualized. Like, for example, the fact that these two women are in a sexual relationship of some sort, because that's just it. You're just constantly seeing them make out. There's no depth to it. They're only there to kind of titillate the audience. And then, oh god, I love this. One of the women gets shot, and they're treating like, oh, she could die, but she gets saved. But while she's recovering from her bullet wound, the father, who once again, she's kind of in this potential relationship with, has a threesome with the two lesbian women. And it's like, oh, that father is such a lady killer, he's so charming, and I'm like, that seems kind of cold and fucked up. And what once again, though, it's like they kind of imply that they're doing that because, you know, they didn't really want to force the father or the transporter into this plot, and so they're kind of making up for it. So I'm thinking, so really they're just continuing being prostitutes. They're just not doing it for money now. And I don't think the film really was thinking along those lines, but I was thinking. That just goes to show that, you know, as much as the film is trying to tell us how, you know, independent and strong these women are, it's still just using them for sex. That's the only real purpose of these characters to be here. The villain, generic villain, but at the same time, he never does anything that makes you really want to see him die. He kills a bunch of gangsters early on in the movie, and yeah, he's prostituting these women and apparently recruited them while they were children, but their parents were the ones who sold them into prostitution, so I kind of feel like that sort of, you have to share the blame. On one hand, he's involved in this, which is fucked up, but it's not like he abducted them from their parents or something like that, something that would really get you to despise this character. And I keep thinking, like, whenever he's encountering, you know, another villain, like, he's going to kill them for failing him or whatever, but he always seems kind of cordial and reasonable, even though, once again, we're supposed to hate this character. So it's like you aren't counting down the moments until he dies, even though obviously you don't like him. But he's, at the same time, he's not portrayed as being especially smart or threatening, so you don't fear him either. You just feel nothing about him. And then, God, what else do I have to say? So that's like all the characterizations are very weak, contradictory, and thin. But then, like, the script, it's constantly doing things that just get on my nerves. Like, it starts off, all right, you have the opening scene where you see the women becoming prostitutes, and then it's like 15 years later, and they look the exact same. And you find out that in the first scene, they were supposed to be like 12 years old. They don't look it. And then, like, the girl who I said gets shot, like, immediately afterwards, after you see the guy have the threesome with the two lesbians, like, she's fine enough to do this underwater sequence where she sneaks up on the boat and then gets shot again and then has enough strength to strangle somebody else. And it's just so dumb and poorly thought out, but not in a funny kind of way. And I've seen these kinds of mistakes done so many times before that I'm just sort of numb to them, but at the same time, you know, it doesn't make it any less bad. So that's all I have to say. The Transporter Refueled sucks. Don't watch it. I did do a written review, so please read that. I've also done written reviews of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and I mentioned before, Kung Fu Killer with Donnie Yen, so read those. My next one will probably be The Brood, a David Cronenberg flick. I haven't watched that yet, so it probably won't be out for a few days. Or maybe The Visit with the M. Night Shyamalan movie. So keep an eye out for those. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.